Welcome to my FlossTube. This is Tall Grass Lane Stitches, and I'd like to show you some of the things I've been working on. I'm pretty sure I haven't posted for probably either close to a year or maybe even well over a year. So for a while I had a running stack that I would add to with the intention of showing you all. And at some point I was like, this is not going to happen. I put it all away, but I've got things to show you again. So that's what I'm going to do. I'd like to start by showing you this. This is a design by Alessandra at Adelaide Needleworks, and it's called Christmas Ball 2010. I've been working on it for a while. If I remember correctly, this chart was actually gifted to me by someone. I think a stitcher that I had met through, I think, the Stitch Mania Facebook group that isn't open anymore. And I had done her a small favor, and she replied saying, hey, pick out a chart for yourself. So this is the one that I bought, and my progress that I've been making is basically in this section here. You can see I gridded it out, which makes me think it might have been a Stitch Mania start from quite a few years ago. And I changed the threads, and just because it's quite a simple design in terms of color, I chose 2 Weeks Dye Works. It's on a white linen. I'm not sure what the count is or the exact details, but it's on a white linen. And then I decided to use Louisiana hot sauce. A little bit of, there we go, Louisiana hot sauce and Hunter. And I just like the way that those just seem like the typical Christmas colors. This piece has a little bit of beadwork in it, and I haven't decided exactly what I'm gonna do when it comes to the color of the beads. I'll make that decision when I come to it. The reason I picked this out to work on again after a long time of not touching it was that I signed up for WIPGO 2022. If you don't know what WIPGO 2022 is, I think most of the stitching world does, but excuse me. It is a Facebook group that is run by Jessie Marie Does Stuff, and I'll link her channel below. And basically you create a bingo board, so a 5x5 grid of projects that you'd like to work on. She calls 2 numbers, so you number each square in the grid. She calls 2 numbers every month, and the idea is that you work on those to meet a goal that you have set. And this was one of my February numbers that was called. And I'm really glad because it's a fairly easy stitch. It's a simple pattern to follow. It's an easy fabric to see. So that one's working well. And I love how the variegation in the red bow turned out. The green is much more mildly variegated, but that red kind of sings, and I love it. The next project I have to show to you is my other February, I was gonna say Friday, but no, my other February project. This is not a simple stitch. And the reason that this one got put on my WIPGO board is that, you might have guessed from seeing it in passing there, is that it is complex. And I had come up to the part where I needed to do some 1/1 stitching, and that had intimidated me, so I put it away for a while. So I put it on my WIPGO board thinking, okay, I'll use this opportunity to get back into it. So this is a chatelaine design by Marina Weber, and it's the Alpine Seasons Garden. I know there's an Outlander version. This is just the basic Alpine Seasons Garden. And I'm using all the called for flosses. So most of these I think are silks here, and the called for fabric. And as you can see, it's been stored for quite a while. There's a few fold marks there. Hopefully they'll kind of come out over time. So I'm gonna see if I can bring this up close so that you can see the 1/1 stitching that had initially caused me to put it away. So this bit here, it's a ton of fun. This fabric isn't nearly as bad as I thought it might be for over 1 stitching. And as long as I've got decent light, it seems to be working fine. It's harder when the colors are darker, but this section's pretty light. There'll be another section of over 1 stitching. There's an eagle up here that I'll need to stitch in. What I've been doing, just for fun, is I've been alternating between a strand of over 1 stitching and then a strand of this border here, this dark blue border. And there's something about stitching with silk that just, oh, it feels so pretty. So that's been a lot of fun too. I've only just started on this as well as the Alessandra Adelaide piece because they're February picks for WhipGo. Now WhipGo, the way it works, you can pick your own goals. Some people set goals of a finish or 500 stitches or whatever. Jessie says your board, your rules. My goal is to stitch on these pieces 10 days in a month. And by 10 days, I'm kind of giving myself a bit of leeway there. So I'm not specifying a minimum or maximum amount of time per day. I'm just, if I stitch on it that day, I give myself a check mark. If I stitch on both of them, I give myself a check mark for each of them. Nothing too onerous. Right now there's time to stitch, but I know some months tend to be busier, so I figured I'd give myself a bit of wiggle room there and not be too hard on myself if and when things don't go my way in stitchy terms. Those were my my February WhipGo picks, but I had 2 projects that I worked on for January, and I was really pleased with the amount of progress I got on them. The one is Frosted Pumpkin Stitchery's Storytime Sampler. This was a stitch along, I don't know how long ago. I'm stitching it on a green, I think it's an even weave. And I changed up the pattern a little bit. I used a Weeks dye works called Cadet for all the frames. And I'm also using it, I stitched the words here out in just a plain white B5200. And then I'm stitching the banner in the same Weeks Cadet. I had, I want to say 4 frames left to go at the beginning of January. I'll see if I can pull out a picture and pop it in at some point so that you can compare. It still needs quite a bit of backstitch. The design doesn't call for a lot of backstitch, but as you can see, all of them are missing their mouths, and then there's little bits here and there. Like this is a wheel, so there'll be some backstitch spokes. Apart from that, the other change that I made is that I randomly gave some of the characters a slightly less pale shade of skin. I tried to pick the ones that, I don't know, I tried to make it random. So we've got Wizard of Oz, Sherlock Holmes. Oh, The Secret Garden. You're all thinking it and telling me. The person who goes down the rabbit hole. Alice in Wonderland. Charlotte's Web. Peter Pan. I believe this one is Lady of Shalott. And Phantom of the Opera. Charles Dickens, The Scrooge Story. there's Joe March, Little Women, Anna Green Gables. I really like how that one turned out. The maple leaf is kind of fun. And Black Beauty. It's an interesting assortment of stories, but they're all stories that I'm familiar with from my childhood, maybe with the exception of Phantom of the Opera. So it was a fun stitch, I have to say. Oh, one more change I've made. The eyes are all stitched in black, or charted in black, and I stitched them in 3799, DMC 3799. I just like the slightly gentler look. It's not quite so harsh. And I often, with Frosted Pumpkins characters, their eyes are charted to be outlined in black as well. And then some of the characters have a little bit of an extra stitch to show eyelashes, and I usually leave that out. And I probably will here too. So there's my Frosted Pumpkin Storytime sampler. Super fun to stitch. I did have to use a bit of gridding, sort of, I would take my gridding thread, I use a sulky sliver, just to outline where the frame would go. Otherwise, I don't know how many times I had to unpick each frame because I would be slightly off center by the time I worked my way around. And once I started adding that sort of temporary guideline, it helped prevent that problem. It also helped once I had a few frames in place, because then I could start comparing where I was at and keeping myself in line there. It's a little bit closer up for you so you can see a little bit more detail. This is definitely one of those stitches where as you work on it, you see things that weren't immediately obvious when you looked at the chart, which is always a lot of fun. That was one of my January stitches. I'll put details for everything below. As much as I can, and if there is something that you would like to know more about that I didn't really talk about, feel free to ask, and I'd love to answer. This is the Cadet Weeks Dye Works Cadet green that I used on the Storytime sampler. And finally, we've got a Mirabilia, and I've got a thread hanging here. I'll just carry that to the back so that you don't have a thread hanging in front of what you're trying to see. Getting there, getting there. Now this is being stitched on quite a dark fabric, and it can be pretty challenging. So I've had to come up with a couple of techniques to get around that, because I love the look of it. The fabric is a linen, custom dye, or not custom dye, but hand dyed by xJuDesign. She's on Etsy. I believe, I don't want to say it wrong, I believe she operates out of Hungary. I hope I got that right. Hungary or Romania, but I think Hungary. And this is her Midnight Blue linen, a 32 count. Now, as you can see, it is very hard to see the holes, which I like for finished product. But, so what I've been doing is I take pictures of the chart and upload them onto my tablet, and I use that as my working chart. And then I have my tablet on my lap, and the lap serves as a bit of backlighting. And with the backlighting, the holes become visible. And it is a nicely spaced linen. So with the backlighting, there are some, that's good. It's easy to see, or easier to see. This, you've probably seen, there's a number of floss tubers who have done this one. This is Mirabilia's The Stargazer, and I've stuck to the suggested DMCs. You can see the spots where the beading will go eventually. Now, I'll have to check. Sometimes on hand-dyed fabrics, the beads that are suggested are a bit too large. And so I might end up having to sub for delicas or something a bit smaller. This here is her sleeve, her upper arm sleeve. And her head will be about here. So stitching on her for 10 days got me a fair bit of progress. Again, I'll stick a picture of where we were at the beginning of January so you can compare. But I think basically all of the lighter portion of her skirt, the ends of the ribbons, and then some of this as well. And definitely all of this was all progress. She shows up on my bingo board 2 more times. And so I'm looking forward to making a lot of progress on her this year. And I just wanted to show you my project bag that I've got. So I made a whole whack of these with some fabric that I had left over. I think it's a Moda fabric that isn't being produced anymore. It's an ombre polka dot, so it does get lighter as you go up. And I just put a tag on there. Some of my tags, I printed out a picture of the chart or the finished, what it's supposed to look like when it's finished. And I just attached it to the zipper. It's lined in, I like to line my bags in white, but this one is lined in a solid matching color. And it's just the right size to contain a chart and my project. They're a lot of fun. They're fun to make, really satisfying, I have to say. So, I hope you liked watching. If it weirds you out when people don't look at the camera, sorry, I'm trying. I don't know if I'm being very successful or not. And I'll talk to you next time. Thanks for watching.